Okay, I forgot to record the session during the class, so I'll try to recreate what happened in the class. So now we started implementing the TrendSetters, the application that answers the questions regarding the TrendSetters last week, and that was the class diagram, and that was the sequence diagram of basically, this is the main functionality there. So last week we had implemented the TrendSetter class, the data source, the Reddit, and the YouTube source. Now we're gonna try to implement that class, and then the main function that would be the access point of the application and tries to call the functions here. So it's pretty much those two functions, the find trend setters and the find trending topics, that are most important, and these are the ones that were depicted here. So for the class, so here's the class that we have prepared. Now we have a function called, the one that when it's called, it would find trending topics. Okay, so I'll define a function called find trending topics, and it takes location. And then here, well, if this is a full application, we would connect it to another API, to API like Google Trends to get the topics. But let's say we eventually found it and we put it in this list. So let's say the popular topics are like surfing and AI, for example. Okay, now we can make this function return the topics, or we can set the topic so it would be accessible to other functions if we set it like this, and or both. Okay, so if we don't intend to use the trending topics otherwise outside of this class, then this would be sufficient. So if we intend to have it used, then we can just return that self.topics. All right, and then the other function that we have here is the find trend setters, which is supposed to find the trend setters per topic, per source. Now, when we thought about the design, we thought only we have two. Let's say when we get into the implementation, we wanted to have it more flexible, so we can have 1, 2, 3, whenever, any type of source, any number of sources. Okay, as long as they have the find popular function, then they should be good. So that should be a loop then. So if you remember, when we get into the implementation, more details will appear and better understanding will come up. We can change our mind about the design that we had initially. Okay, so initially we only had two and we call them directly like this, and then we change our mind. So that's supposed to be a loop. So when we get to update this, we should be able to add a loop here that loops over the sources. Okay. And then we're gonna need to update, like, I mean, there are more updates that need to fix this, but this is the general direction that we're going. So let's see. Now here in the design, we didn't decide how the trend setter will know the sources. Okay, so we can add this detail. Let's say, for example, that we're gonna have the resources set in the constructor or initialized in the constructor. So I'm gonna define the init function. And then in the init function, I want to receive an arbitrary number of sources. So I can use the star and I call this sources. And we know that this arbitrary number of arguments collects the arguments into a list. So we can initialize self.sources equal sources, the list that would be coming in the constructor. All right. Now the other function that we need to implement is the find trend setters. Find trend setters. And that function that loops over the topics. Okay, so there are two loops here. There is one loop that goes over the topics, and then there is one loop that loops over the sources. And then we call the find popular based on that. So let's see. So the first loop for topic in topics. And this topic is accessible through the self-reference. We are going to loop over the sources. So for source in self.sources, we're gonna call the source dot get popular. Remember the function find popular. And we give it the topic. Okay. Now the find popular returns, the way we implemented it is that it returns a list of trend setters, right? So it returns a list of trend setters. So we can collect them all in one list. So let's say self.setters, initialize it with an empty list. And then every time we call the find popular, we extend this list with what comes as a return from the find popular. So we can say self.setters.extend. Extend is like append, but append take one element and add it as a single element, but extend takes an iterable and add the elements in the iterable one by one. So it would add all the elements one by one that are coming from the calling find popular and append it to accumulated in the trend setters, the setters list that we have. Okay. That's pretty much it, and we can return the self.setters in case it is needed outside. And we can also have a function called print trend setters that loops over setter and self dot and print them. And of course, every function in the class needs to have the has a parameter, a first parameter to receive the reference to the object that we oftentimes is the convention to call itself. Okay, so that should be it for the class itself. Now let's see with the main access. So the access, the main script in which we're gonna create the main function. What is the access point of the application? All right.